Hey guys, so we're going to talk about 2.2 Luther and the Protestant Reformation. And so this is going to be probably one of the most important lessons or units or pieces of a unit that we are going to see all year in AP Euro, because it's going to lead to so much change socially, politically, and then obviously religiously, okay? So first and foremost, so Luther, we know, is going to be born in the German states. His father is going to be a lawyer, so he is going to want him to study law as well. But Luther is going to have sort of like a road, on the road conversion. If you're familiar with the Bible at all, we talk about the Saul-Paul conversion. When Saul is on the road, the Lord comes to him and says, hey, you're going to be now Paul, you're going to be reborn, you're going to stop persecuting, blah, 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 right? Now, Luther's not obviously persecuting Christians, but it's sort of a similar situation where Luther is walking to town and there's a thunderstorm, and obviously back in the 16th century, they had a very different view of thunder and storms and all those things, so a thunderstorm was a very, very big deal, and Luther had a conversion on the road. And so once he does that, he is going to be, he's going to commit himself and become an Augustinian monk. Okay, so he's going to become an Augustinian monk. And then he is going to be one of those in his order that is going to be very, very devout. And he's going to think that there's no purpose to his life and so on and so forth. And so that is going to lead him to begin to question his faith. How can God do all these things? How can there be, bad people in the world? How can, all of these things, okay? And so that is going to lead Luther, as I said, to start to question the Catholic Church, but he never intended to break from said Catholic Church, okay? Luther just wanted to reform it so it would be easier for people to find faith, because again, when Luther was questioning this, when Luther was saying, well, if I have these questions and I'm an Augustinian monk, what are normal people? How are normal people going to live and understand the good works of God? Okay, and so Luther is one of those guys that one of his quotes was, "Idle hands are the devil's plaything," and you're going to see this actually in Protestantism, especially if you look at the history of America. When you look at the founding of the Connecticut colony and Roger Williams and all those guys. Protestants are very thrifty people. They always want to be working. And so Luther says, idle hands are the devil's plaything. And so he begins to do things and so on and so forth. All right. And so Luther is going to begin thinking about deeper theology of the Catholic Church, specifically looking at things like the 7 sacraments. But at that point, there were like 1,000 sacraments. And Matthew, and I know that's not exactly correct, but forgive me, I'm not up on the sacraments as a non-practicing Catholic person, And so he's going to look at a deeper theology of the Catholic Church. And one of his biggest things was indulgences, okay? So it has been a product of the Catholic Church in the late 15th and early 16th century to sort of profit from their monopoly on salvation. All right, and so to do that, they are going to sell indulgences, and they're going to portray them in a way that's not happy, that doesn't make Luther happy. And so what the indulgences are is they are going to be a remittance of sin, and essentially you can buy people's path out of purgatory or lessen their burden in purgatory, because in the Catholic doctrine, when a person dies, they go to purgatory until the resurrection of Christ, and you can actually get people out of purgatory by praying for them. And so you would pray for them and pray for them and pray for them, and the more people pray for them, according to Catholic doctrine, the easier it would be, or the quicker they would get out of purgatory, which is a place of eternal suffering. It's not hell, but it is a place of eternal suffering until the resurrection of Christ, okay, until Christ returns. All right, and so the indulgences for the Pope Leo, and then popes preceding him, but Pope Leo at this point, was to be a remittance of sin. But Luther understood it to not be a remittance of sin alone. So you could buy the indulgences, but that did not necessarily absolve you of all your sins. Okay, and so these are going to be, and this is where Luther really gets angry, is these are going to be sold frivolously to people with no explanation. So people are just going to say, oh, hey, buy this indulgence. And then, people, whoever you pray for, whoever's name you say, they will be, 100 years will be taken off their sentence in purgatory, something like that. All right. So this is where the trouble really gets going. Okay. So Pope Leo X is going to issue the sale of indulgences to pay for St. Peter's Basilica starting in 1515. Okay. So St. Peter's Basilica is still there to this day. It's very, very famous. It's where, if you've ever watched any kind of papal mass, anything like that, he comes out of the window of the Vatican, and I forget exactly the terminology for it, Matthew Enon, but he comes onto his little papal balcony, and that is, that is St. Peter's Basilica, that is the square, so on and so forth, okay? And so he is going to start to sell these indulgences. And so a guy by the name of Johann Tetzel, all right, is going to love this idea, and he has a fascination with selling indulgences because he feels that is going to get him favor with the higher ups in the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church is a hierarchy of the Pope. You have cardinals, you have bishops, you have priests, all those other people in there. And Tetzel believes that selling indulgences and getting money for the church is going to help him advance his career. So Tetzel had this great quote here that Luther just absolutely cannot stand. And so it is when a coin in the coffer rings, a soul from purgatory springs. Okay, so he had this clever thing that he would go from town to town in Germany, and he'd be selling these, and he'd be saying these things, and Luther had a real problem with this. All right, so Luther is going to start lecturing on his 97 Theses, because it starts off as 97, and these 97 Theses are going to develop from the problems he's going to see in the Catholic Church when he is rewind a little bit. He is actually going to be essentially not removed from the Augustinian order, but he is going to be sort of expelled from the monastery, and then he is going to be moved and into a preaching position in Wittenberg. And so this is where he's going to begin lecturing on the 97 Theses, but, okay, he is going to say that everything of his 95 Theses, essentially his 95 problems, it's like too short of the Jay-Z song, he is going to say that everything fits within the doctrine of the Catholic Church. Okay, so like saying things like, we can't say it can't be a Latin liturgy anymore because it's not accessible to the masses. Or, we can't expect people to take the Eucharist as like a transubstantiation. All those things, okay? So he is saying that all of the complaints that he is saying, they still fit within the Catholic Church. The changes he wants to make are still doctrinally similar to the doctrine of the Catholic Church. Now, Luther is going to be dramatically aided by the printing press. Okay, so we talked about this. 1453, Gutenberg is going to invent the movable type printing press, and this is going to very, 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 very much impact Luther. Okay, so Luther, who's going to write these 95 Theses, and he's going to post them on the door of the castle church in Wittenberg. That is obviously the famous scene. That is what people believe is the Kickstarter of the Protestant Reformation. But it is Luther that is going to send these 97 or 95 Theses out to the bishops and the various other important church people. Okay, so that he is going to utilize the printing press to make copies of this, because he's obviously going to find someone that is sympathetic to his causes, and he's going to have them print multiple copies of this essential first attack of the Catholic Church, and he's going to give that to people. And the more people's hands he gets this into, the more people he has a chance of saying, oh, hey, this makes sense, all right? And so the revolution is going to truly start when those men make copies and share it with those men, so on and so forth. So it's like Luther makes 30 copies, and then those 30 guys that he gives it to make 30 copies, and it's like a pyramid scheme in reverse, all right? And so without Gutenberg, this Reformation never leaves Wittenberg, all right? I'm going to stand by that wholeheartedly, okay? because if Luther doesn't have the ability to make multiple copies, he has to write them by hand, which is going to take a while, and that detracts from a lot of stuff that he has to do, all right? So, moving forward, okay? So, Luther is going to continue his doctrinal reformation. He is going to publish biblical defenses of his thesis. So you can't just sit there and say, oh, the Catholic Church is bad, here are the things I find wrong with it, without backing it up from the Bible. So Luther is going to really develop the Bible as the backbone of all arguments. And so that is really a big difference, because in the Catholic Church at this point, the Pope is, he's the vicar of Christ. He's, St. Peter's he's St. Peter's successor. He is essentially the representative of Christ on earth, and he is allowed to make certain doctrinal allowances and do this and do that. Luther is going to say the Pope is not the supreme authority. The Bible is the supreme authority, and so he is going to use the Bible to defend his 95 Theses. And this is where he starts to get even in more trouble, because he is questioning the authority of the Pope to make these decisions. But of course, he does that because of all the way back here, when you see Pope Leo is going to say, hey, we're going to sell indulgences. Luther doesn't agree with that, and so now he is going to start to question the Pope and his authority, all right? So if we move ahead a little bit to this, all right, so as I said, that doesn't go over so well. The Pope really doesn't like when his authority is questioned. Again, when you are the St. Peter's successor, you wear the ring of the fisherman, you do all those things, and the nice big pointy hat. Well, it's not really pointy, but anyway, it's a nice big hat, okay? He is going to not really like that so much. All right, so the Pope, who, again, has the hierarchy of the church, is going to begin to pressure bishops in Germany, or the Holy Roman Empire at this point, and say, hey, Luther, what's Luther doing, man? So we're going to start to see a pushback against Luther. All right? And so one of Luther's biggest arguments that you're going to see develop later is Docendi sunt Christiani. Okay? And Matthew Enon, I don't know how your Latin is, so I have to have the translation there for you. And everybody else obviously not taking Latin. So Docendi sunt Christiani means Christians must be taught. So Luther believes that people just going to church every Sunday to hear the Latin liturgy, which they can't understand, is not good enough. They're doing them a disservice, so then they are relying solely on the church, which is technically kind of what the Pope wants. But Luther believes that the lay person, the common person, needs to be taught. They need to be educated. They need to be taught the Bible, which at this point is another one of his arguments is difficult, because the Bible is only in Latin. There's no vernacular Bible mass-produced. Obviously, Gutenberg translates it, and there's the Gutenberg Bible in German, but that's still a High German, which a lot of people don't read. They need a vernacular Bible, which means in the language of the people, all right? So Luther is going to talk about this, and so I talked about the Bible being the supreme authority of the church, of religion, so on and so forth. But Luther is going to believe in something called the primacy of the Scriptures, all right? So people should look to the Bible for true salvation. So it does not come from the church. It does not come from any other source. It comes from the Bible. And so this is where you're going to see Luther's real problem is salvation through faith alone. That is Luther's huge thing, salvation through faith alone. So if you read the Bible and you believe, then according to Luther, you will be saved. Now, with the Catholic Church, with their whole purgatory and sinful life and remittance of sins and all these things, that doesn't necessarily jive with the Catholic Church as well, because they want you to believe, they want you to confess, they want you to pay, and then they want you to suffer in purgatory, and then and only then, when Christ is resurrected, you will then go and find your place in heaven. All right. So, to the primacy of the Scripture thing, Luther is going to translate the New Testament in 1522, and if you're not familiar with the Bible, the New Testament is all about the life of Jesus, and so that is going to be a really big deal for his salvation, or for a person's salvation. And so again, this is going to be, Luther is going to solidify one of his largest complaints, where he is going to develop and write the vernacular Bible, which he undoubtedly goes to the printing press to have copies printed. All right, and so unfortunately, this is where he says the Latin liturgy needs to be abolished. So you can't have a priest standing up there and saying, oh, hey, Latin, Latin, Latin for an hour, and nobody gets anything out of it. All right? And so this is going to really cause a problem with over the years. All right, so obviously this whole thing starts before 1519, but it really gets going in 1519, and it is going to be 1518. Okay, sorry, 1517 is the 95 Theses. I don't know why I said 1519 the entire time, but anyway, 1517, and then by the time it's 1518, a lot has happened, and he is going to be called to a hearing at Augsburg, okay? And so he is going to defend, but more importantly, recant his positions that he has put forth in the previous year within the 95 Theses, all right? And so this is going to be a big deal. The Pope is going to send a representative, and the representative is going to say, hey, you got to recant. Luther is not going to do that. Luther is not going to recant any of his statements because he firmly believes that this is what is truly correct. So Luther's there, he doesn't recant, and then it's kind of like, well, where do we go from there? So he gets a reprieve, and not like a reprieve in like, oh, they kind of let him go, but he gets a reprieve in the fact that Maximilian I is going to die. Now, Maximilian I is the Holy Roman Emperor. He is essentially, the second in command to the Pope in terms of power. He is going to be the one that is the defender of the faith, because this is kind of before Henry VIII gets declared defender of the faith, and then when he decides that in 1533 he is going to break from the Catholic Church. Anyway, so Maximilian I, the Holy Roman Emperor, he's going to be able to put pressure on the electors and the other electors in the Holy Roman Emperor at this point to pressure Luther, but he's going to die. Okay, so he's going to die, and it's going to create a whole power vacuum in the Holy Roman Empire. So instead of a consistent anti-Luther message, the princes are able to circulate Luther's teachings. Okay, so because Maximilian I, who is obviously a devout Catholic, dies, Luther is then able to say, oh, hey, there's no one here to sort of force me to do these things, and the Pope isn't really pushing full force because he doesn't know any better yet, or he doesn't know the full extent yet. And so the princes in Germany, aka the electors of the electorates, which essentially are little territories within the Holy Roman Empire, they are allowed to push Luther's message without fear of retribution. All right? But Charles I, who is the grandson of Maximilian I, which we talked about in the Habsburg family tree, becomes Charles V because he is elected Holy Roman Emperor, and he's going to serve from 1519 to 1558. But Luther gets another reprieve. So Charles is too busy consolidating power to worry about Luther, okay, because he is elected, but he's not elected by a great majority in the Holy Roman Empire. So he has to go to all these electors that didn't vote for him, say, oh, hey, this is what we're going to do, and this is why I'm going to be, why I was the best choice. So he's consolidating power politically. He doesn't have any time to deal with this Luther and his religious problems. All right, so Luther is then able to go ahead and survive and, as they say, live to fight another day. All right, where the problem for Luther arises is this: the address to the Christian nobility of the German nation. Okay, so Luther knows that peasants are not going to help him win this Reformation. He has to get the nobility on his side. So Luther is going to attempt to sway the nobility, but and this is good for him because the nobility already had a certain distrust of the Catholic Church. They have to pay taxes to the Catholic Church. They have to essentially listen to what the Catholic Church says, or they're going to fear excommunication. So they don't really like the Catholic Church already, and so that's really good for him, okay? And so if you look real quick, this is a great PR move for Luther, again, because it is the nobility that are going to be able to curry favor because they are the ones that control the day-to-day operations. All right, so looking at that and moving ahead just to our last little bit here. So after he publishes that, wow, and I can't even remember the name now, the address to the Christian nobility of the German nation. There we go. So, of course, I couldn't remember the name. So after that, he is going to be called even more over the coals, all right, more out on the carpet. And so he is going to be called to the Diet of Worms. Now, Worms is a town in Germany. Actually, the town in the Holy Roman Empire. All right, it is not they're not actually making the guy eat worms, okay? But it is a town, and I forget exactly what electorate it's in. But anyway, he is going to be called to the Diet of Worms, and essentially this is like the Pope would say, oh, hey, there's a diet of this or there's a diet of that, and it is essentially just like a council where they're going to be questioning people, all right? So all the important people are going to be gathered there. The Pope is going to send his representative to question Luther. There's going to be a lot of things. Electors, bishops, Roman legates are there. Peasants that traveled. And so, again, they try and force Luther to recant. Now, this is in 1521, 4 years after the 95 Theses in 1517. Then you're going to see him, the Augsburg, the Council of Augsburg, where he's going to be asked to recant. That was 1518. Now, fast forward, it's the Diet of Worms. He's not going to recant again. So, the problem is, again, with Charles, is that he is still too new. And since Luther wrote the address to the Christian nobility, he has a lot of powerful people on his side, okay? Because, once again, the Holy Roman Empire is not like, it's not like he inherited the throne of Spain. He's a monarchy, and Charles can rule absolutely. He actually has to be beholden to the people that are powerful, so the nobility, so the electors, all right? And so he doesn't really have a lot of strength to push back against Luther because he already has support. So because Charles is the king of Spain as well, he needs the troops from Germany and the revenue from Germany to help solidify his entire vast empire. So he really can't make the Germans mad. And plus, he is young and inexperienced. I mean, he's literally, I think he was born in 1500. So he's literally like 21 years old at this point. Imagine trying to be a 21-year-old and controlling the Holy Roman Empire and Spain and pretty much some of Portugal, okay? So as I said, Luther had the support of many nobles. And so Charles needed to solidify his title as emperor with the Pope. So he really needed a strong, unified Germany, and that means unified politically behind him, not fighting him over something as, quibblesome as religion, okay? So looking at the conclusions of this, so Luther did not recant, obviously. Okay, he was able to leave Worms, which was not good for the Catholic faith because it allowed the Protestant Reformation to continue, and then the people were able to continue to practice his teachings, okay? So there was no fear, or very limited fear, of papal retribution. Let's write punishment, because I don't feel like writing retribution. All right? And so this is going to lead to things further down the road, like the Peace of Augsburg, which I think I talked about yesterday. All right, the Peace of Augsburg, un momento, por favor, okay? Peace of Augsburg. There we go, and that is going to be in 1555. All right, guys, so that is essentially Luther and his part in the Reformation. Obviously, the Reformation is going to be... he's going to be a huge part in it, but there's going to be more to the Reformation than just Luther. So hopefully this helped you out. Hopefully you got something from this. All right, see ya.